Hopkinton, and welcome back to the Hangout Hour. This HCAM TV series, live most Wednesdays at 7 p.m., seeks to connect with you and connect you to our community. We bring you a mix of segments with people in positions that serve our community, and we also want to hang out with you to see how you're doing and what you're up to lately. Here at HCAM, we like talking with you and sharing stories, so consider joining us. We're all friends and neighbors here. To connect with the Hangout Hour for yourself or to suggest another in our community, drop us an email or give us a call. Really, this is why we're here. Later in this program, I'll be talking with Sean McAuliffe of the Board of Health to get all the latest on the course of COVID in Hopkinton. And I'll be catching up with John Ritz about what he's been up to. But first, I have the pleasure of talking with Nanette Kenrick, who has written a book with the absolute best title, Secret Letters to My Psychiatrist. She's also involved with our Hopkinton Historical Society, so she's got a lot going on. Nanette, welcome to the Hangout Hour.
Thank you for having me.
It is definitely my pleasure. So, we're going to talk a little bit about your work and your volunteerism and this book that you wrote. But before that, I'd just like to talk a little bit about how you came to be in our Hopkinton community.
Well, I lived in Southborough for a great many years, and I was single, and I was looking for some way to spend my time recreationally. And I joined the Hopkinton Historical Society, and they had a lecture series that was open on Sunday afternoons, and that fit right in with my schedule. And so it was great. I used to come over every 2 months, go to the lectures. I met all these people from Hopkinton. I had a wonderful time, and that's how I got to decided that I wanted to move to Hopkinton.
That honestly is fantastic because I just, I always talk about what a great town Hopkinton is and how we have so much going on. And it's so awesome when you hear about somebody who actually lived in a neighboring town but yet was joining a Hopkinton institution because you found it very interesting and fascinating. And then the next thing you know, here you are in town.
Yes, I sold my house and I found a condo here in Hopkinton for low and medium income people,
Mm-hmm.
and it was great. I moved in here. I found a new church, St. Paul's Episcopal Church, right down the street from me.
Yeah.
I joined their spaghetti suppers. I met a whole lot of people from Hopkinton. Went there on Wednesday nights and just had a great time.
Yeah, that's great. In fact, you had mentioned while we were chatting just before the show started that you are the clerk of St. Paul's Episcopal Church.
Yes, I am. I have a lot of menial tasks. I do a lot of taking notes and making copies and doing fundraisers with them, and I'm kind of the backbone of the church.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That is really great. And another group that you're involved with is the singles group in town, right?
Yes, I was head of the coordinator for the singles group in at the church. We welcomed all members, all singles from anywhere in the neighboring towns. And
Mm-hmm.
we went to a baseball game. We have ice cream socials. We um, we had a game night. We played chess and checkers, and we do things that you can't get into unless you belong to a group.
Yep, yep. That's great. That is really great. Um, and I'm sure that it's been difficult, as it has been for all of us these past, starting on 3 years now. How have you been making it through the pandemic?
I myself have been very lonely.
Mm-hmm.
The meetings that I have at my church have saved me socially, and I've been able to reach out to people in the church community. When the uh, Hoppington Senior Center was open, I went there for lunches and met people at the lunches. I, did whatever they had open, and it's been very difficult.
Yep. Yep. I
If you're
understand
not
that.
in a family group, it's you miss people terribly.
Right. Right. I know it's just been really hard having to isolate so long. And personally, for myself, I started thinking things were starting to turn around, and then Delta came around, and now Omicron came around. It's been really nonstop, hasn't it?
Yes, I'm really tired of it. A lot of people are tired of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I spent my last three birthdays alone. I think I spent my last three Thanksgivings alone. I spent Christmas alone, New Year's alone.
Mm-hmm.
I did get out for the 4th of July, but all the holidays are vacant for me for these 3 years.
Right. Right. Wow. Well, I wish that I had found you sooner because now you're on the Hangout Hour, and you know, you're part of our happy HCAM family, and we should definitely keep in touch as things are moving on.
Thank you.
Now, I want to talk about your work at the Historical Society, but I just can't hold myself back anymore. Um, Secret Letters to My Psychiatrist is one of the best titles of a book that I have heard. And tell me a little bit about how the concept came about and how you came up with that title.
Well, in my sessions to my psychiatrist, I told him stories of events and incidents in my life, and he called me a Scheherazade. Scheherazade was the wife of the Sultan of India, and the Sultan was betrayed by one of his wives, and so he remarried. Every time he remarried, he executed his wife,
Mm.
and he ran out of royal virgins. He finally hit on the vizier's daughter, who was Scheherazade, and she was a well-educated person. She read maps, she spoke languages, and she, on her wedding night, she started telling him a story, and she told it so well and so exciting and so fascinating, and didn't finish the story. And she said, I won't finish it till tomorrow night. So we let her live. And this went on for 1,001 nights. And it was supposed to be the originator of Cinderella, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, and a whole lot of other Arabian Nights stories. And I just modeled myself after Scheherazade.
Mm.
I wrote up all of these escapades that I had talked to my psychiatrist about as a letter, and each letter is a chapter in my book. And it's not about serious illness. It's not about murder or cooking or anything that's a typical book. It's just fun reading.
Mm.
I've had people come to me and say, "I loved your book. I thought it was great. I thought it was very entertaining, and it was wonderful." So I take your chances and buy my book. Um, some of the stories I talk about are like being unemployed, losing your job, and dealing with that circumstance, a death in the family,
Mm-hmm.
um, different things like that are typical of many people who go to psychiatrists.
Yeah.
And for people who have never been to a psychiatrist, my opening chapter starts with my first session with my psychiatrist and what goes on. And they might be surprised to find out what goes on. It's not what you think.
Yeah.
It's a fun book, and I don't want to tell you too much about it because I want you to read it.
Yes. Yeah.
But uh,
So let me
each
ask.
story has a twist to it, a comedy or humor or surprise.
Mm-hmm.
People who have reviewed the book say it has twists and turns, shorts and stops,
Oh.
and kind of a fun thing to read.
Yes. Now, are any of these letters as chapters are they autobiographical or is
It's all
everything
autobiographical. It all takes place in Metro West.
okay?
and I name places where I worked or where these things happened, like a tea room or a company that I worked for, in a general way, so that you could identify with what they are in Mitch West if you're familiar with the area.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the copyright in suing, I could not put the actual name of the place in, but
Okay.
uh, I think anyone who reads it will get the message from it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. And when did you write it?
I started October of last year,
Mm-hmm.
and I was ready to turn it into a publisher in April. What I found out was that no publishing is really going on right now because of the pandemic. They're not taking new authors. They're not doing any publishing. A lot of publishing houses are closed. The telephone just ring off the hook. They don't answer them. So I didn't think that I was going to get published. I happened to hit upon Newman Springs Publishing Company, and it's a self publisher. I did have to pay to have the book published for services,
Yes.
and it worked out very well. They're a quality group. I went through editing in July and August, page production, a lot of work with setting it up, and technical things that you don't know about until you write a book, until you're an author.
Yeah.
And so it was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
It finally came out about just before Thanksgiving. I hired one of the members of my church, who is a publicist, Lori Roback,
Yeah.
and she did the local publicity for me and publicized the book so that I would get sales in December. I'm not going to get paid royalties until probably April.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just takes that long for them to calculate it all.
Right. Right. So, where can people find Secret Letters to My Psychiatrist? Is it on Amazon? Or
Amazon,
is it...
Barnes and Nobles,
Okay.
and a lot of the ebooks are out now. Ingram Publishing Company is going to distribute it to their bookstores probably in the next few weeks.
Okay.
So it should be available pretty widely.
Mm. That's...
People I know have gotten it from Amazon.
Yep. Yep. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's a very creative endeavor, and it sounds fascinating. Now, have you begun working on your second book?
I have started it a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to do the same thing or not.
Uh huh.
I'm not sure what I want to do. If I want to do the same venue or if I want to try something in historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Hopkinton Historical Society, I've written two articles in their newsletter. One was on the Spite House, and one was on New England one room schoolhouses.
Okay.
And I thought maybe I might do something historic.
Yes. We should have you back on just to talk about the Spite House. That's. I remember when I was there and John showed me that picture. That's an amazing story. Now, so how did writing become part of your life? Have you always been an avid reader? Have you written before? How did you say to yourself, "I'm going to write a book"?
Well, I had always been a writer. I wrote for my junior high school newspaper. Wrote for my senior high school paper. I was a book review editor for the senior high school paper, Algonquin.
Mm-hmm.
And in college, I wrote for the college paper. I had all of my poetry published by Worcester State College in their newsletter. Um, I also was published widely in the Worcester newspapers, my poetry, and I took a course in writing when I applied to Worcester State College. I was accepted for a scholarship for creative writing ability,
Ah.
and I sort of came up with the idea when I started hearing about Scheherazade
Mm-hmm.
and what she had done, and thought, if I had written down all these stories that I told my psychiatrist, it would be kind of fun for people to read. and they would get a kick out of it. And so that's why I started writing and the book. And it's been my dream to be a published author.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm quite an author now. I had a book signing at Tatnick Bookstore in Westboro,
Oh.
and that was 2 Saturdays ago, the Saturday after New Year's, and so many people came. So
Mm-hmm.
many people,
Oh.
incredible. They just came and they talked to me about my book and what was it like to be seen by a psychiatrist and what would you say is a good psychiatrist and things like that. That you never get conversations like that with the ordinary person.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. I could continue on this, but our time is starting to grow short. So I want to talk a little bit about um, your work at the Historical Society. So,
Yes, I was elected to the board of directors, and I really was looking for something that I can make a contribution to. And Mary Arnott, who is the treasurer on our board, said, "Why don't we restart the newsletter that we had years ago?" And the board picked me to be the editor. They didn't know I had a nose for news. And I was lucky. I had John Palmer helping me. John Palmer is our president now, but he was a member at that time. And first time he ever wrote, and he wrote about a local a high school principal who was accused wrongly of slandering someone. And the town loved her so much, it was personally for her so much that they defied the Board of Education and made statewide news. And they almost called us a militia because the fighting over it was so great. And John wrote a 3-part series on this woman. She later was cleared. She became principal of the school and she started the Women's Club in Hopkinton. So it was a fascinating start to the newsletter. I also published in that first issue, there was a contest by the local veterans for someone to write a historic essay, and a lot of high school seniors applied for that. And there was one in particular who wrote an article about a group of Hopkinton people in the 1700s who raided the Springfield Armory for guns
mm-hmm.
and to fight against some particular political cause, and made for the start of the U.S. Army. And it was fascinating. It was written very well, went over very well with the members, and that was the start of the newsletter about 2 years ago. And we were going strong. We have about 3 newsletters a year.
Mm-hmm.
We've done stories on walk through central uh, um, oh, I can't think of the name of it. Central Acres, the walk that's part of the town.
Okay.
That Bob Snyder wrote about
Okay.
it, and he's a local person who belongs to the Trails Committee,
Mm-hmm.
Central Trail. That's it.
Oh, okay.
And we also had articles on different topics,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, very well accepted by our members. And we've had articles come in from the library. We've had articles come in from people who visited us. Uh, we're going strong. We'll hope to put an issue out this end of this February.
Yeah.
And uh, John Palmer is writing another article for this one about a Hopkintonian from World War II who was working on the Yangtze River for the U.S. Navy fighting pirates in China. And we
Wow.
have Eric Pratt, who is a historian who works with us, writing an article about the Fitch family member. The Fitch family was in Hopkins for 300 years. This particular family member went to Kansas when it was reorganized either as a slave state or a free state,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a terrible fight over it, and he was killed in a bloody raid there. And so that's a fascinating story too.
Yes.
All the stories are historically accurate. They're based on research that we do here in the Hopkinton Historical Center, and just a wonderful read. Wonderful read.
Yes.
And if you're a member and you're not getting the newsletter, we don't have your email address.
Mm.
So send it to us. Call the contact number on the Hobbiton Historical Society website and or send us an email and give us your new email address.
Mm.
If you are hearing about this for the first time and you would like to read a newsletter, this next one that's coming out is going to be free. Um, you can send in your email address to us and we'll put you on the list. Usually you have to be a member. It's a $30 membership for a single person. I forget what it is for a family, but you can look it up on
Hmm.
the website.
So I just want to mention, I don't know um, if you're aware of this, but you are such an interesting promotion for the Historical Society, because these stories that you just briefly mentioned and just rattled off one right after the other are so fascinating. And I really think that it's really important that you mentioned those, because I have been inside the Historical Society and it is truly a gem. It is truly astounding the types of things that you have in there, and the history and the pictures and the items and just the stories of what has gone on. It's really hard. Our world changes so fast, and these things here are real, and they're just so, so cool. And you're all doing a great job in preserving and getting the word out about some of these things. It's just so important. So,
Well, come and visit us, everyone who's
yeah,
listening. Come and visit us, and
exactly.
we'll show you many of the maps that we have. Our collection of maps is superb. They're on the walls there for you to look at, and very old ones going back to the 1700s
Yep,
and also 1800s, showing buildings and places of business in the town of Hopkinton.
yep.
Um, just fun to look at.
I bet
Oh,
you a lot of people don't know. I've heard Chuck Joseph talking about some of the history in town, and when it came to making shoes, Hopkinton was a big name back then.
yes.
We talk about the sleepy little town that Hopkinton was, and it was a sleepy little town at one time, but before it was that, it was a big, booming industrial town. So, what are some of the things that you find most fascinating when you look at the history of our community?
Uh, I don't know. I couldn't pick one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, just the stories that we have accumulated in our archives, handwritten accounts of different things that happened.
Yep.
One of the stories that I wrote on was the Spite House,
Yep.
which was owned by two brothers in Hopkinton on Spring Street. And they inherited the house, but they didn't want to live together. So they divided the house in half. One half was painted yellow, one half was painted red, and they used two different doorways to go in and out. One side was for a farm, and one side was for a garden, and they split the water supply, um, and they lived in antagonistic times with each other, fighting it off. And finally, they both left, and the house went into decay.
Yep.
But famous throughout Hopkinton, the Spite House.
Yes, yeah, that's really amazing. One of the things that I found really interesting is some of the history that survived before, like Hopkinton actually was a town, and some of the records were kept by Faith Community Church um, from way, way long ago. And you can read accounts and you can read reports through the American Revolution, through the Civil War, and to just think that we're sitting and we're standing in a place that has a history that goes that far back, and it's just amazing.
We're open to the public to come and also to send by email the request for any historical information or documentation that they need as as to who owned their house before they
Mm-hmm.
lived in it, or their family history or the cemetery history. We answer all those questions by email.
Yep. That's great. When's the next issue coming out of the newsletter?
February, the end of February.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for spending this time here with us on the Hangout Hour.
Okay, buy my book.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Secret Letters to My Psychiatrist. I love it.
A lot of fun to read.
All right, Nanette, we'll be in touch again. Thank you so much for all your
Okay,
time. All right.
bye bye.
Bye bye. All right, in just a few minutes, I'll be talking with our Board of Health Director, Sean McAuliffe, about everything happening down at the Board of Health. But first, I'd like to catch up with John Ritz and see what he's been up to. So, John, welcome to the Hangout Hour.
Howdy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Now, this little 5-minute section I call catching up because we're just talking to people and catching up and seeing what they're doing. And I need to mention that, John, because the list of things that you've been doing lately grows long, and it's amazing. And people may think like, oh, we invited John on because he's involved in so much stuff and he's doing all these things. Well, actually, we invited you on because we just want to connect with our community, and you're a part of that.
Oh,
But
thanks.
that being said, you do have a lot going on.
I do. I'm retired. I'm not supposed to have this much going on, but my calendar is massively open.
It's
Um,
such a good thing,
Full of stuff.
Yeah. When my father retired, I used to worry. I was like, what is he gonna do? He's gonna have nothing to do. But there's always something, always something keeping him going.
I always remember my father was saying there just wasn't enough time in the day for all the things he needed to get to after he retired. So
Yeah,
I know that.
yeah.
So, so
So
what have I been to? Interesting. Part of this ties into your last guest in the history, but um, I wrote down a few things. Trails Club has been really a big thing for me recently. Mostly, we've been working on stuff with the Upper Charles Trail Committee, and anybody who is watching HCAM before the Hangout Hour may have seen the Upper Charles Trail Committee meeting where the Trails Club presented an alternative route to the route that the committee's been proposing. I'm not going to go into those details. People can go to the Trails Club website and read all about our concerns and that. But that's been pretty all-consuming. That's had all of us going back and forth on emails and doing research, and that's been huge. But
yeah,
Trails Club is going to slow down in the winter. Just the opposite. We're busier than ever. We have monthly walks that I wind up planning and leading a lot of times. We have work days where we try to work on a trail. We had to postpone one of those
hmm
because of snow, but we transitioned it into a different kind of work day, a snow work day, where a bunch of us gathered on snowshoes and went out and walked on the trails at Fruit Street, which
oh,
is something that Parks and Rec reached out to us to help with. They're trying to put together a cross-country skiing program this winter,
hmm
and asked the Trails Club, "Do you know some good trails for skiing?" And we said, "Yeah, Fruit Street's great." And they said, "Fine, can you help us make the trails, pack them down for the skiers?" So
yeah,
um, anytime there's a snowstorm, we're going to be out there doing that.
great.
Um,
All right. And so, yeah, and I believe that was your idea that put your meeting out live today. So that was pretty nice. Thank you.
we're trying to get as much community involvement as possible with that process. It's been kind of hidden, so we're trying to shed a little light on it.
That's awesome. That's great. Now, one thing I'd like to mention because I find it very interesting is what's your connection with the Hop Kinetics robotics tournament?
Well, well, that's what I was doing most of this afternoon. I spent most of the afternoon on Zoom calls interviewing teams, robotics teams of students, high school students, um, and it's part of the judging.
Yep.
I have a rubric that I go through, and I ask them questions, and I score them all on various points. So I talked to 5 different teams over the last 2 days, and I'll be putting the scores together anytime now.
Excellent. Wow, that's really great. And lastly, before our time runs out, you are also one of the premier volunteers here at HCAM. Not only do you volunteer on our board, but you also work on anything that you can attend. You know, you're one of the producers that is really just has the mindset, I like to make TV, and whatever the content is, whatever the position is, whether it's camera operator or director or running the audio or being a grip, you're like always there, ready to go. So tell us briefly some of the things that you've been working on lately for HCAM.
Back to the Trails Club. I created a video for the Trails Club for the MLK celebration. And I've been doing a lot of the winter sports. Mostly I've been doing basketball, but excitingly, I'm doing alpine skiing. Tomorrow night we'll be going out. Hopefully we can fix some technical issues we had and stream it out, but that's massively popular. It's over at Ski Ward in Shrewsbury.
Yeah, that's great. That's a wonderful service. A lot of this whole past pandemic years, a lot of people can't attend the games. So a lot of other communities have been watching us because they can see their kids as they're competing against Hopkinton. So that is a great service that you're working on with us.
Yeah, I actually got a comment last week at the ski races. They said they actually split. There are five or six schools that all compete, and because of COVID, they had to split them into 2 separate nights. And the teams that weren't on the night that I was there were all really upset because their races weren't getting broadcast.
Oh,
so they specifically came to HCAM at the beginning of the season and said, "You'll be there with a camera, right?"
Yeah, that's a great affirmation of your work. All right, sir. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for this show. And I'll see you soon because we're going to do a segment with the Trails Club, and catch everybody up on all your other stuff going on.
Very good. Have a good night.
Have a great night. Bye-bye, John. All right, and now for our final segment, let's hang out with Sean from the Board of Health and see what all the latest news and the guidance is. Sean, welcome to the Hangout Hour.
It's a tough crew to follow.
I have no doubts you can handle it. You have.
I'm going to have to talk to Nanette about putting a couple books together.
Yes, I know. She's fascinating. She
was.
You can definitely hold your own because you know what? You've got information that everybody thinks about all day long, right?
Yeah, right.
All right. So I think before I pepper you with all of my questions and stuff, if you're interested, I'd like to just give you a few minutes to tell us what the latest is as you're following the Omicron variant and what may be happening.
Well, I can start by saying that I don't think it comes as any surprise that, we as, the rest of Massachusetts and the country really were overwhelmed by Omicron.
Yeah.
We've never seen case counts like this. I've never had staff or staff in other departments that were supporting us in such despair. But we're seeing, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Omicron is still the dominant strain in town. It's been so since about mid-December. But we're starting to see a drop consistent with the state, a drop in our case counts. And when you start looking at our vaccination rates compared to the amount of illness that we've had in town, there's not much place or much room for Omicron to spread to. So that's giving us a lot of hope. And, and I credit, the residents of Hopkinton for stepping up, supporting our vaccination clinics. Um, we're we have one of the best vaccination rates in the state. And then when you take a look at the country, as a whole, we're up there in that top percentage across the country. So, there's a lot that, we as a department and us as a community should be proud of, because we've stepped up, we've done what we needed to do. And now we're transitioning into a different and interesting phase, with both the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education. So they just released some new standards, new guidance today, and
Okay.
and we'll see where that goes.
All right. So I want to ask you about that. However, can you tell me, where are we with the vaccination rate in our community?
So if you look at the states, the total rate for the town, the state has is at 94%. So 94% of our entire population has been fully vaccinated.
Okay.
And our 5 to 11-year-olds, we were at 91% fully vaccinated. As of last Thursday, we've gone and vaccinated another, I think, 70 since last Thursday. So I expect us to be close to 95%.
Okay.
Come this Thursday when the data is released.
So now, I don't want to get hung up on herd immunity or not, but I'm fascinated to ask, with our high vaccination rate and this very, very virulent Omicron, right? How were the cases in Hopkinton?
We've been doing really well. The numbers are staggering. I was just looking today. I think it'll end up being about 15% of the population contracted Omicron in January. Right now in January.
Okay.
And we still have 10 days left.
Yep.
And last month we had about 12% or more. So for the month of January, we've had 764 cases reported to Maven, or the state system.
Yep.
This month. And in our conversations with the state health department, their recommendation is for us to consider 40 to 60% of those cases that did occur weren't reported to us and haven't made it into the system.
Yeah.
So our number, I have no doubt that we're over 1,000, probably just over 1,000 for the month of January.
And do you have any idea how many of those were reinfections?
Significant number.
Yeah.
So we're averaging 98% breakthrough. We were, just this week, I think we've had at least five cases that have been reinfected within the last 90 days. So we're seeing people who contracted Delta at the end of October or November.
Yeah.
We're getting infected with Omicron now. But, within all of this, we start looking at, and this is brought up, on, multiple fronts within the town. We're doing well. I'd say, I think we have had less than 10 residents have been hospitalized, over the 1,000 or so cases we've had.
Wow. Wow.
So that's fantastic. And it's demonstrating that, the vaccination's working, and those that have fallen ill and needed hospitalization or required hospitalization, it was, several were unvaccinated,
Yeah.
and then several were just, they were in, tough shape.
Yeah.
There was, one that comes to mind. They had COPD with other issues, and we had several long conversations with them. We got them to go into the hospital early. They got treatment, and their blood saturation levels were frighteningly low,
Uh-huh.
but they recovered in their home. So
Right.
it's the fact that we did plan ahead. I am grateful for all the college kids and all the interns that came back to work for me, and Simone, over the winter break, because
Yeah.
they were instrumental in us being able to get out and contact, the individuals that we felt were at greatest risk. And I credit them with
Yeah.
having these positive outcomes.
Yeah, that's a fantastic. I mean, around 1,000, little more cases, and about 10 people that went to the hospital. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like I said, we've done really well as a community.
Right.
And
Right.
and 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 even Simone and I were going through the numbers today, and they had a backlog this morning of like 29 cases,
Mm-hmm.
which there are communities that haven't contact traced for weeks or months. They're not making any calls. They have no idea where they stand as a community, and they're struggling to get vaccination clinics stood up. So
Yeah.
again, we've done well.
Are
I think
you
that
contact tracing?
we say we're not, but we're still reaching out to people where we think there's a high risk, where we can see evidence of a cluster, or a cluster that's on the fringe of like a potential sensitive party.
Yeah.
And then we're doing what we can to help clean up the nursery schools or the kindergartens.
Yeah.
Like that's that population, being unvaccinated and then having siblings that have contracted Omicron. I mean, our daycares have taken a beating, and
Yeah.
so it's just sitting down and figuring out, what we can do, re-educating them on, the different set of symptoms they should be looking at with Omicron, and it's one of the, like the current third rail in our department is, we sat down with the school nurses, Dr. Kavanaugh, to work on a strategy that we thought would reduce the number of cases in the school system.
Yeah.
And I admit I took some heat from the state for the testing on day 6, but as we started looking at the data coming out of our day 6 testing,
Yeah.
on any given day, 20 to 40% of the kids coming out of their 5-day isolation were still infected with active illness. And as I would sit down with parents, at the clinics and stuff, and we have kids that are sick. They're going to be sitting down possibly next to your child at lunch or at snack.
Yeah.
And, what we're doing is trying to keep those, sick kids at home so we don't perpetuate this. And so we can get, back to a little more of a stable school environment. And, there are probably 6 or 7 communities in the area that are about to adopt a similar program, because, they can see that our data is supporting it. DESE and the DPH have quietly agreed that what we're doing is in the best interest of public health,
Yep.
although it's not consistent with, the current guidance.
Right.
And, if we've helped a few families avoid, going through the COVID experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's fantastic.
All right. So let me ask you. I know, like, I don't know how the contact tracing is going. Like, if it's very thorough or if you're doing some of it. But my general wonder is, if you look at the contact tracing that you've done and you take out the obvious, people had a party and a bunch of people in that party got it, or somebody in a family got it and the rest of the family members got it. If you take out those easy, obvious ones, are you seeing a significant number of infections within the community where they're like, I don't know where it's coming from, but I just go to the grocery store and the bank and I have COVID?
Yeah, I mean, at a percent positivity rate, of 21.24, it's spreading throughout the community. And there were a whole bunch of college kids that I sat down with, and they're like, no, honestly, I haven't been anywhere. My mom's got me, locked down in my old bedroom, and I can't go out. I don't know where I got it. And then you find out that they were doing the grocery shopping, or they were running errands,
Yeah.
and we believe that, they were picking it up, during these excursions outside the home. We've seen, it's people have been bringing it home from work.
Yeah.
And then, the interesting thing is when the state started rolling out the variant report, you can see that Hopkinton travels.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've, the one of the outbreaks in the schools that then went out into the community, it's this odd Australian variant.
Okay.
And we've got strains from the islands, from South America, Mexico, all over Europe. The kind of the German, France, Spanish region, and then a lot from the British Isles. And it's interesting watching, these trends where, like the Australian one, ripped through the town in the month of November, and then it got out competed by another Delta variant from I think Great Britain. So it's telling. I mean, there's definitely a book. Like I said, I got to talk to Nanette.
Yeah.
But it's but now that people, we're through the holiday season, we expect that we'll continue to see our rates
Right.
decline.
So, just out of curiosity, do you know who went to Australia?
They're not from Hopkinton.
Okay. All right. Now,
I know how it got in.
Yep.
But and to their, I mean, they were asymptomatic.
yeah.
At least to start, and then like most, they just dismissed the symptoms as
Right.
being an allergy.
Right.
And then that was the kind of the insidious thing about Omicron was it was presenting itself with an entirely different set of symptoms. So,
Yeah.
I kind of poo-pooed some parents who were like, but you still sent your kid to school after they were throwing up all morning. But and it looked like food poisoning, and then they felt better, and they had no fever, and they had no sinus issues.
Yeah.
But the Omicron tends to settle in your pharynx, and instead of going up into the sinus passages, it went down in their stomach.
I had a person who was like, "Oh, my, this place I am, the air is very dry, and it just makes my voice sound funny. Oh, boom,
Right.
that person had COVID. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, I've been a head case because I contracted a respiratory virus and then a secondary virus.
Yeah.
And, I can't tell you how many test kits I've burned through.
Oh, it's just so hard. It's because everything feels like COVID, and I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask a quick question. When you do these, the contact tracing that you do you ask people? Look, I know you say you're staying at home, but you do what you go out to the grocery store. You have to you can't live in a room. Do you wear a mask when you go out? Do you ask that question?
We, so when we issue, so when I say we're doing like a contact tracing light right now,
Okay.
but we still have a regulatory obligation to issue you either your isolation guidance, or your quarantine guidance. So if you're violating those, you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that there were some early on that didn't appreciate the fact that they thought, oh, well, I can make a run to the grocery store, or and in one case we had the police department stop by and reminded them of what their
Right. But
isolation.
Sean, I'm not asking about like somebody who has contracted it and then this is what they have to do. I'm just curious. People who say, "Oh, I've caught this," are they wearing masks? Does that make how much of a difference does that make?
There are a large number of people that are following all the rules, but
Yep.
they might be wearing a cloth mask.
Yeah.
Omicron is it's distributed more in an aerosolized manner than like Delta.
Yeah.
And that's what, given the dry weather, the lack of, gunk in your nose,
Yeah.
it's what allows it to get a little deeper and settle into your pharynx. So I'd say, I'd be guessing, but it's a large proportion of the residents in Hopkinton are following the rules and still contracting COVID.
Yeah. All right. Our time is starting to grow short, and I just wanted to make sure if you had anything you wanted to tell us about what you mentioned briefly, some new guidance from DESE and from the state. What's the latest?
So DESE is relieving the school nurses of the responsibility to contact trace. Within the next 2 weeks, the children in Hopkinton will be sent home with test kits, and if kids become symptomatic or at a certain time each week, they'll be testing at home with the test kits. Where personal responsibility comes into play, parents will be required to notify the school nurse, or they can notify the health department. We'll have shared spreadsheets, and we'll be working with the school nurses to help, control, to isolate and quarantine people and family members that are ill.
Yeah.
So we'll still have that contact. It just won't be the 30-minute or the 15-minute conversation. And then what we're doing is we're bringing resources to help, families transition into this next phase. Because, like norovirus or the flu, this is just something we're going to be dealing with. We'll get better at dealing with it. What we're hoping is that we don't have any, nasty or as virulent strains, developing. So we're gonna, it's gonna become, or it is, an endemic disease now.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna have to learn to live with it. And I think over the last 2 years, we've got pretty good, and I think we'll get a lot better at it. And I think, with the therapies that we have, and again, we've got additional, they're going to come out with some additional and probably better boosters in the future. So that's working. And then we're just coming up with tools just to make everyday life with COVID easier.
Yep.
There's the new VaxSmart, so you don't have to carry a card. You can download your vaccination information onto your phone. If you find that that information is incorrect or incomplete, you can contact me or Simone, and we can edit your records. You can order test kits now from the federal government
Yep.
through the United Postal Service. If you Google USPS and test kits, it'll bring you to the USPS site, and you can order 4 free kits for home. They're sending the federal government's sending out N95 masks to the public. What are the other things that are going on? We're bringing, Project N95. That's a good resource for residents in town
Yep.
to go to. They vet the face covering providers. They also vet the test kit providers. 2 of the featured face coverings or N95 masks that they have vetted are Massachusetts-based companies. So, we can shop locally, and then they're reliable. They have a reliable service.
Okay.
And then, we just went out and we just pulled in another $69,000 in grants to help set up booster clinics and to start, again, better supporting our most vulnerable residents, and just, our municipality and others in general, so that we'll have face coverings. We're bringing in test kits. We're looking at whether or not we should buy a bulk load of test kits, and if we did, how that would be that we're working on how that would be potentially distributed, but it's expensive. I mean,
Yeah.
the governor touts you can buy test kits, but I got to buy a pallet of them at like $77,000.
I see.
I'd rather put that towards the senior center or the library.
Yeah.
So.
All right, Sean, thank you so much for coming on and spending this time. And please come back soon.
Yes, I will. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for all your work. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye. And that's our show. My thanks to Nanette, John, and Sean, and to you for watching. You really are the reason we're here, and I invite you to hang out with us sometime. I hope you see that we're pretty casual here, and hope we've brought a little connectedness to your day. Reach out to me with any thoughts to make our show better, and I'll see you next week during the Hangout Hour.